Wicked. We're live. Brian Koska.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. So, Invisible Grounds is a podcast.
I should correct you quick.
Okay.
It's a singular, no plural. You said
Invisible Ground.
There you go.
Awesome.
A common mistake.
Yeah, and it looks like pretty cool. It's like opposite of this. A lot of production.
Give yourself some more credit than that.
Cool.
It's a different kind of thing, as a documentary podcast too. They're interviews, but I spend a lot more time with them. So you have to be quick. And
yeah. How did this start? Did it just start with like you and an idea?
Yeah, sort of. My background, there's a couple different versions of that story, as there are, right? The whole project came out of my MFA thesis at OU. But that's sort of...
Masters of Fine Arts?
Yeah,
okay.
And that was I did a Master of Fine Arts in Communication Media Arts, so it's a newer program in Scripps. So it's designed, and it actually explains the rest of it pretty well. It's designed for mid-career creative professionals who want to do different stuff. And so I had worked in a lot of different, sort of industries and areas specifically, which we'll probably talk about at some point later on. I worked out at Stewart's Opera House and Nelsonville Music Festival for about 12 years as the marketing director. So I joke that marketing director makes it seem bigger because it seems as if I'm directing someone, but often in that time, not always, I was the only person doing it. So, graphic design, web design, promotion, I've been playing in bands for as long as I can remember. So, recording, audio, all of those kinds of things, community outreach, have sort of all been part of most things I've done.
Yeah.
So this project sort of, when I went back to school in 2019, I started in the fall of 2019.
Oh, right before COVID.
Yeah. So it was like normal for a minute and then very not normal. And I was, I think 37 maybe when I started school. Does that sound right? Yeah. So everyone had that moment, no matter what they were doing, of, oh my God, but I had the oh no, what did I do? I quit my job and I came back to school. But it all worked out, and I think when I went back into that, I didn't know what I was going to do at first, for my thesis. But my work there, my two areas of study were audio storytelling and graphic design, publication design, and then my third area of focus or topic, right, of those production areas was public history. So I kind of went into it with that idea. I'd always been passionate about history. I've always been involved in kind of community projects and audio things and design things. And so this sort of coalesced it all in those couple years at school, but specifically that last year was like all thesis. So the podcast came first. You mentioned COVID. And so I dove into that a little bit quicker than I was planning in those 3 years. I had been doing podcasts for years. One with a Friends About the Browns that was mostly scrubbed from the internet now, maybe, and then music stuff too,
It's just like stuff you're interested in.
Stuff I was interested in, things to do, and it was an extension of the other work I was doing. And so I had dabbled in it, but not in that way of doing like the full-on kind of documentary press and storytelling and all of that world that started to develop. So it came out of that. And then the podcast came first while I was still in school. So I did a few episodes of it over that time. And then in spring of 2022, when I was finishing up my thesis, that was when the whole sort of project came out. And essentially what it is it's the podcast is the audio version of this sort of history and local connections project. And then the visual component is these immersive historic sites. And so it's those two things together, and then, of course, mixed up with all sorts of other bits and pieces.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you're saying like 22. So when did you first start publishing episodes? And where are you publishing?
So
episodes?
I publish all over the place. I have I host through Simplecast, but those are all over. They're on Apple Podcasts. They're on Spotify. They're all those places. Yeah, the podcast started, I think the first episode would probably be 2021 or so, and it was just a couple at first, and there's still fewer and farther between. You joke about your operation, but you're churning them out, and I think that there's a different, those are two different models. Like I'm sort of making these documentary movies each time I do one, so I go way
there's
too
like
long.
credits, like credits of like people that edited it, and then the credits of the people that are like making music, and like it was the Stewart's Opera House one. Like it took me to a website. Yeah. Maybe I was on your Instagram and like took a link there, but that is cool.
Yeah, and it's a whole thing, I don't have a huge crew. The project is mostly me, but I do have some people that help edit audio, which is great when you have 7 or 8 90-minute interviews of things you got to pull, 2 minutes from or 3 minutes from. Yeah, and that's as the project has been growing too. So I mean, initially it was 100% me. I'd say now maybe we're in the 80 to 85% world or something.
Yeah,
I get a little bit of help around the edges. So yeah.
But it's still the same thing in that like you're just kind of taking a topic and so then explain like those like interviews and stuff to me. Like what is like even preparing for one of those? How do you even decide who to interview on like whatever?
Yeah. So I mean that's the kind of the interesting thing about it. Each podcast, for the most part, they're not exclusively where they all match up to these sites as well. But I mean, you're talking about sort of usually one location, a site as a project. And so, for instance, you mentioned Stewart's Opera House, the Stewart's site, which is even actually breaks the rule as some of these tend to do. There's one inside and one outside. And so you can see these historic images with the app through augmented reality inside and outside the theater or at any of these sites, these 11 that are present right now, and there's a few more in production. And then usually, though again, it's not always mutually exclusive, I guess, there's a podcast episode then. So the idea about each of those places. So the idea is that you sort of do a deep dive into the history, importance, and connections of one topic or place. It's not always a place. Sometimes it might be an idea. Sometimes it might be a region or a story. And then from there, you're doing a few different things with that. We make the podcast episode, which is the long form version of being interested in that content. And then it sort of goes back from there. These immersive historic sites all contain physical signs that you walk up to that would be more what most people are used to seeing on the roadside or at a national park or state park or even a museum. But from there, you can use the app to see these augmented reality images.
Yeah, what is this app you're talking about?
Invisible Ground. Yeah. Oh. So the podcast is literally one piece of the project. It is a visible piece. But yeah, the main part is these using AR to see actual historic sites in the place where you're at, the physical location. So for instance, we'll move off of Stewart's for a minute. At the Barry Hotel uptown here in Athens, it's no longer there. It's been replaced. It's been gone for about 50 years now or so. But that's a hugely important and beautiful and historic building. And there's this very important Black history to it in Athens. It's a building that has it has connections to Mount Zion. It has connections to the Albany Enterprise Academy, which are all other places I've done these markers and podcasts too. So you can kind of see how the pattern develops here a little bit. But yeah, the idea is you can go there with the Invisible Ground app. And you can look at the sign. I have a sign across the street there next to Lucky's. I almost said Paupers. And then you can use your phone in those locations, including the barrier and these other markers, and the app to point it at a designated location. And then in your camera view, the actual historic image comes up. So you can stand there across the street, see the Barry Hotel.
Like overlay it. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. Transparent, kind of overlaid in your camera view. And so the idea, even kind of going back to the thesis and thinking of grad school, there was a visual component and then an audio component. And both of them involve storytelling. Both of them overlap. So it's both about presenting history, these stories, these local connections that are really important in our own community, but also these huge national stories. It's about presenting those kind of in a couple different formats, but they all overlap. And so you're using storytelling through the visual by bringing these places to life, but also making people observe them in the physical location, which is also huge. I mean, all of a sudden you're standing in the same place that you're seeing these things and you're hearing about these things. And then the idea is from there, you can, it's sort of like a funnel with different options, right? You can walk by the sign, read the sign, 30 seconds, learn something new, be like, that's what that thing is. Okay, cool. You can have the app take 2 minutes and look at the photos and be like, whoa, that's cool. I didn't realize that was there. Or in the case of Mount Zion or the courthouse, these are old historic images of how these places have changed, right? And so you can see quick, that's cool, And then even in the app, you can listen to a quick audio thing that's one voice of someone giving an interpretation, a sort of like quick, like more of a museum piece. And then if you love all of that and you're still desiring to learn more, you have these podcast episodes. And then what's funny about it is those two projects both exist together and separately, So there's people that find out about it from the app and go check out these places and see this stuff and then go, whoa, and then check out the podcast and then vice versa. But the podcast, the app, obviously, you can only do those here in the physical locations. It's still been growing and successful, too, and kind of going into all sorts of new collaborations and ground as well. But the podcast has been crazy. I mean, I think at this point, even though it is about Southeast Ohio and its connections to all these places, I think now we're at 48 states and like 61 countries or something. And so there's also this sort of like, these stories go far beyond these sort of ideas. I think we connect with them. We all do, no matter where you're at, you know?
So then even like the execution of this app, how are you putting that together?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's funny. It's like, it seems like sort of a joking thing to be like, oh, that's a whole podcast series in itself, but it probably is, you know. I have some help there. That's where the help started, you know. So when you mentioned like seeing a couple credits, I think that's awesome too, because I always used to be like, man, I'd see these NPR podcasts or these big podcasts and you'd see 40 people working on them. And you go, man, if I could find like one or two, that'd be great, right? And so it first started, you know, maybe a person editing here and there in the podcast, but the big help started with someone helping me with that augmented reality piece. So when I was in school, that wasn't one of the areas I was studying. I got a crash course in AR and kind of all that. But the other pieces that I was studying the years as a graphic designer, web designer, and also just like a producer in general. I mean, so even going back to my work at Stewart's and the festival and stuff, and I was producing events and producing, community collaborations and all sorts of different things. And so even that sort of put me in the right frame of mind to sort of come up with how do these different pieces work. And then it goes even beyond that. You didn't even ask this, but each site is so different. Each place is so different how these things work. So each one, there's things that continue as a thread and help, but you always get new problems and issues, right? But yeah, so that was the first thing I had someone help with. And when I was in grad school, it was actually a colleague of mine, my friend Akbar, who was in my program and was here studying from Uzbekistan and is still doing some really awesome stuff up in Milwaukee with some augmented reality and virtual reality stuff. But that was his thing. So he got it right away. I explained it to him and he's like, yeah, we could totally do that. Nice. And so, you know, he helped a bunch. I worked with him to kind of get that initial one going, the visual thing. And from there, it's changed a little bit, you know, just like anything. I mean, everything changes over the course of a few years in any technology, but that world is like just totally nuts. And what I was doing in 2022, it's very different now. And I imagine it'll be very different even in 6 months. And so that sort of morphed over time to the augmented reality piece. And now for about the last maybe year and a half or so, I've been working with the same developer. And she's in Canada, actually. It's through, I hired her through Upwork because I needed someone with a very specific skill set. And so I was looking for an augmented reality producer who had made apps before. And so with her, we sort of changed it as the site grew, project grew from one site to now there's 11 that are public, and then there'll be like 16 after this next update in a month or two. And then hopefully, you know, more and more and more, it becomes this sort of beast that you have to sort of organize and scale. And so she's been really awesome in that because she now, with working on a year and a half of it, she gets the whole thing too. But yeah, man, it is a process. You know, research-wise, going back to who to interview, you're kind of thinking about who knows stuff about these sites, who knows stuff. And obviously, I work with the Southeast Ohio History Center directly. They're my fiscal agent and exhibition partner, so I can apply for grants through them. I can get donations if there's anyone out here that wants to give me a bucket, a small or large bucket of money, we can give it through them. And so that's nice. You know, you can do some things with them, but as an exhibition partner and also as a credibility, especially at the beginning, that helped a ton.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And of course, they're a huge resource. So not only their library and their collections, but also the staff and the people there. So, you know, they show up a lot, but so do, you know, basically the easiest way to describe it is each one of these places, especially when we get into some of the history that's not as unfortunately present on the landscape, when we start to talk about Black history and Indigenous history and, you know, even labor history and mental health history. Even when I did the Ridges one, you end up on these topics, right, where like they're not the most prevalent. So usually what happens is there are people that have been working very, very, very hard their entire lives to preserve all of that history and information. And so, you know, it's not always an easy thing, but like, for instance, I did this story about Tablertown, and David Butcher has kept that whole history of his family and his community, not only all of it, kept an oral history up for hundreds of years that eventually he was able to prove true with documents, but he literally like is keeping that history alive and started a museum. And so, like, obviously, okay, we're doing that one. We got to go talk to him.
Say that again. Where is this at?
This is out in Tabortown, out past Stewart, Ohio. Yeah, he's someone you should talk to. I'll put you in touch. David's amazing.
Nice.
But again, it's just a great example of, like, that's the person, right?
Yeah,
that's the person who knows everything. That's the person that's been doing the work. That's the person who is really good at telling the story.
Yeah.
And, for the podcast and for the project, that's who I'm looking for. And so it's a mix of both those actual folks that have been keepers of the history, keepers of the stories, the good voices that are telling those stories like they know them and have been doing the work, which they have, combined with people that have been involved with other projects or collaborations with those places, or sometimes occasionally, someone that might be viewed more as an expert. Not that those people are viewed as expert, but I mean occasionally a professor, right, or an author gets thrown in there too. But it is actual real people and the people that know this stuff. And, for anyone here, in the Athens community, if you listen to Invisible Gone, you're going to hear people You're going to hear people that you've heard before, and people you don't know that then all of a sudden you're going to start noticing, oh, yeah, that person's around too. Yeah. And with that, and then I'm in there too. I'm the connector of stories, know. And so we write all that too. But that's really where that kind of world comes from, Those are the finding the people to talk to, which part of it comes from, I am an amateur historian and a researcher. And I've lived here for a while. So even going back to my Stewart's days, I became the amateur historian there.
Are you originally from here?
No, I'm originally from Lorain, Ohio, up by Cleveland.
Okay, yeah.
But I've been here since I came as an undergrad. So
and then came back for master's. So both. Okay.
No, I've been here the whole time.
Oh, when you came for your undergrad, you never left.
Correct.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've been here since the fall of 2001. Man.
Nice.
Yeah.
What kept you in Athens, like in between the undergraduate and the master's?
Opera House. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I lucked into the kind of job that I think sometimes you spend like your whole life trying to find. I was pretty aware of it and thankful for it. But I started working there doing AmeriCorps. And so I worked out there. I started there when I was 24. Wow. So, I mean, I think there was 3 or 4 of us there at the time. And my first day of work was the 3rd Nelsonville Music Festival, and it was still a day instead of 3 days. And it was still behind Rocky Boots. So I'm dating myself in many ways. But so that, when I took that job initially, my background was not, I had been a musician. I'd played in bands. I'd put on shows. I'd been an appreciator of art and sort of person involved with that stuff on very small scales. It was never anything that I thought I'd be able to do anything for a sort of living, Mm-hmm. And I fell into it and then fell into the right kind of place where, I could learn how to do things I didn't know how to do and be given some work that maybe I wouldn't have been given somewhere else, because there would have been more people working there, or would have been a bigger place, or someone would have been taking care of it. And it really, that sort of led into that whole thing too, that, not only involves my day-to-day life and kind of wanting to stay around here, learning about the community, meeting people, getting sort of really involved with doing things here and seeing that other kind of end of it. That was a huge thing. But man, I'd be lying if I said when I initially took that job, I thought I'd still be here. However many years later, I was still in my mid-20s trying to figure it out. And I thought, man, if I was thinking 6 months ahead at that point, that was an incredible feat. But at some point that just totally shifted. I worked out there for a total of 12 years. I loved it. I still love it. I still help out and still try to be a part of it. Though, probably not as much as my wife still does a ton of volunteering and helps with the festival in addition to her normal stuff. And I do too, but I put in a lot of time. So sometimes I'm a bit peripheral of, maybe don't volunteer as much as other people, but I did a lot in my time. But that was sort of where I fell in love with Athens County and with Athens, and where it went from becoming like this place that was really special and beautiful as an undergrad and as a young person into home, like full on home, And so again, to kind of bring it back too, I think that's where not only you have a sense of where to start with some of these other projects, but that was where I first started really getting that interest in, even when I was in undergrad, I wasn't one of those people that was like, oh, I go to Ohio University. I live at Ohio University. It's like, I live in Athens. But I live in Athens, and I tried to, as much as I could, go explore and visit and, made friends with people who had grown up here and people who had decided to stay here or moved here in addition to my friends in college. I think playing music or doing art gives you that sort of extra off ramp to those people.
Yeah.
And then at Stewart's, it just went even more so, because once I was out in Nelsonville instead of Athens, I was still living here, but I was working out there and doing these bigger community projects, meeting all these people out there, but also meeting people here or working with them more, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then, after doing that so long, it stays in your blood. So even when you go back to school and you think, I need a break from all of this, your projects and ideas, those connections. I mean, one, you'd be stupid not to keep trying to going with those for the things that you're doing, but also it's just like impossible. Like your thought process is sort of just so informed by that you immediately think like, who can I get to help me do this? Who do I know that knows how to do this? And so that's how I approached, it worked out. I mean, that was how I approached grad school, and then how I've approached Invisible Ground kind of sense.
Is this your first like entrepreneurial endeavor? Like
No, but it's the first one that's been like this, like business job full on, like this is my job largely. I adjunct at OU, so I teach a couple classes a year, one in the spring and then one in summer. And I do some freelance work still, because you have to, I think, or at least keep that avenue open. But, But this is it. And so it's grown from a thesis into that. Definitely could not have done that in my early 20s or mid 20s. That's involved a lot of planning and stress, and also just kind of being more for the project than myself, if that makes sense, But it kind of all came out of that, I guess. It's just a little bit different now. But there's been other endeavors. I mean, like I said, I still do one, which I joke is a no-profit, not necessarily a non-profit, but I run a music collective with a friend of mine, Ohio Music, like record label music collective, since 2004, called Aqua Bear Legion. We've put out about, including that record I gave you, but we've put out probably about 20 some things over the years, compilations, vinyl, CDs, online, download. We were doing, in fact, our first release in 2004 was a download compilation, which back then was like cutting edge, bud. That was before Spotify, and Amazon was still selling books, I think. And that's just sort of, again, another creative endeavor. Me and my friend Todd Jacobs, who lives in Athens as well, who I've worked with on that. I play music with him as well in a band, and have on and off for many years. But that sort of came out of our love for all of that too, playing shows at rock and roll bars, and collaborating with people, and seeing kind of all this amazing music that was going on around the state and still does. So I'm in my early 40s now. I'm a little out of touch with that compared to how I was, but it still exists, and it's still a thing, and it can be found. You can go on Aqua Bear Legion on Bandcamp and listen to a bunch of sweet Ohio music from the last 21 years.
Aqua Bear Legion.
Yeah, Aqua Bear Legion. Nice. It's sort of a play on like a Moose Lodge or American Legion, but Aqua Bear's a mythical creature. Lives in, not much to explain there. He lives in the water. It was sort of a joke, actually, at the time, to think of something that hadn't been like snapped up in another way. Mm-hmm. But it turned out actually that there's lots of other Aqua Bears. They're usually children's swim teams, so they'll come up in the Google search too. And it's so the Legion part's sort of a play on that. So and that's just that's always been kind of a loose thing. It's transformed and mutated over the years. We used to put on tons of shows. We used to put on like an annual big weekend of shows, and then just little shows all over the place, the Union, Arts West, everywhere, places that don't exist at all anymore here, and then put out things, But at times, I had done a podcast on there for a long, long time called The Western Reserve that was all Ohio music. And so it was much more like listening to an hour radio show, a college radio show, but it was me, and it was a podcast. And so, to me, it's so funny to sit down and talk about all this stuff in an interview. It's really easy to see all the linear connections between all of these things and be like, oh yeah, there's this and this and this, and they all kind of tie together. But I always say that like none of it makes any sense when you're doing it. I had a social studies education degree. It was my undergrad too, and I didn't teach social studies at all. And now here I am, not that I didn't love history and wasn't involved in teaching here and there, but now here I am making a history app and podcast
close the circle, man.
And I'm going and working with the middle school and with schools, and so it's a trip.
That's your school. What are you doing with middle school?
So I've done a couple projects with them with Invisible Ground. They've made some podcasts. We did a big talk about really bringing it full circle. We did a big project last fall at the West State Street Cemetery up the road, which is a really awesome place, and also a very historic and very great example of all of this stuff. In fact, the first episode of Invisible Ground, even this, it seems like I planned it. The first episode of Invisible Ground is on the West State Street Cemetery. And it's sort of the place where I got like sort of some of these ideas started bouncing around. They took a long time to marinate, as happens, you know. But I did a project with the school where essentially they did some research into the cemetery. We did a public history tour, so the students spread out all around the cemetery, and I think about 150 people came throughout the day and would go walk around and learn about historic figures that the students knew about. I mean, these are 7th and 8th graders too. They're awesome. They're all part of the Andrew Jackson Davison Club, which is local history and social justice and all sorts of just really awesome things that these students do. They've only been around for a few years there at the middle school, but yeah, so they got to do research, make podcasts, and interview people. It was a lot like an Invisible Ground episode. And one time they did a project for the Barry, when they did the play for the Barry Hotel 2, the students and I did a project where they made stories. There's an audio episode of Invisible Ground with the students making each part.
It's really cool.
And then this was the second thing I kind of did with them going back to the cemetery. And I say that's full circle too, because that was the summer after I graduated from OU the first time, back in the summer of 2006. That was my summer job, was I worked for the city at that cemetery and painted that fence. I did a really bad job of it. In fact, you can still tell and it's hilarious because I'm like working with the city and everything now, and it makes me feel so bad. I would have never thought those things would have came to pass. But you can tell where I stopped applying the coat, like the sort of outer coat to it changes color the last like little bit towards Arts West.
Shit, 19 years, dude.
Well, I was going to say now it's actually cool. I should stop talking about it because now it's just beat up over time, right? But it was really funny. Yeah, so I spent the summer there. I got put there, I'm pretty sure, because I was the last person to start working the summer gig and no one wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And I scraped and painted that wrought iron fence, which sucked. Real bad, and it was really hot. And then I spent the rest of my time weed whacking and cleaning up around the cemetery. And so that's a really interesting place because not only does it have everything you could imagine historically, you know, there's Revolutionary War veterans and Black Civil War troops and founders of Athens, and you know, you can walk around and just see the names of halls and streets and towns, and you know, it's there. The other really interesting thing about that space is that there's some stones that have the stories of people on them. There was a guy, W.E. Peters, that lived in Athens that did that years and years ago. In fact, his house, his law practice, he did a lot of stuff in Athens, but his house is what's poking out of BW3 on Union Street. That was actually, there's a house coming out of the top of it, and that's his house. It was his law practice, but he died in the 40s, and among a million list of things was a superintendent of that cemetery for a little while. And so why it's unique and why it kind of led to Invisible Ground is like you can walk around that cemetery even if you just got dropped there by a UFO and you immediately would start learning things. And it's in a very different way. You know, it's like outdoors in this setting, and it kind of changes the way you look at some of this stuff. And then you start looking at other things differently, and you're walking around town and thinking about all this stuff. And so as that sort of happened to me over the summer, you know, those ideas. And then, of course, I worked for a year doing AmeriCorps at a school and then went to Stewart's after that. So this stuff bounced around for a decade plus, you know.
It's just like how it happens. It's
totally.
Like then there becomes a point where it's like you like have no choice but to address this thing that has finally gurgled over this. Yeah, man. I get that.
And again, I'm really thankful that I I went into grad school with that as an intention, right? Like I had been working, I was taking time off of work to go do this. I didn't know.
What is even that risk like? What is that like for you personally, right? Like you're gonna stop making money to go do something like that's a scary fucking thing to decide to do.
Terrifying. I mean, my wife was incredibly supportive.
That's good, yeah.
But also supportive to the point that I think she was able to kind of push me that extra little bit when I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And her, as the other person, was like, no, like it really does. As the outside person, like we can figure the other stuff out.
Yeah, it was like more distance to it.
Yeah, right. And so I think she saw that too, that all of these things were kind of coalescing, and that to me it seemed like a risk. It still does. Jeez, talking about it, even when you said it, I'm like, oh my God, I can immediately feel how I felt that was when I first developed, like I would go to the doctor. I was trying to figure out like, oh, I'm having stomach problems. It's like, and they were like, oh, are you doing anything different? I'm like, yeah, I just quit my job at 12 years to go back to grad school. And they were like, well, yeah, your stomach hurts because
you're stressed the fuck out.
Stressed out. And so, you know, like it's one of those things, but at the time I felt that way. But I think she and other people, I mean, especially as time went on in the program and the process of this coming up eventually with this project, were like, yeah, you know, that's what you should be doing. And then the more I got into it, I sort of really settled into that world that was different than the one that I had been in. And that's what I'm saying. Like I went into it going, I wasn't necessarily thinking like I got to make something that's going to be the thing that I keep doing. I think anybody that goes into anything with that attitude, it's hard, right?
Yeah, you're usually disappointed.
Totally. Yeah. Especially me. I'm crazy, right? Yeah. So I'm going to be way more disappointed in myself than anybody else. So it's always like, oh, that's a setup for failure in every way. But I sort of approached it like this is the best chance for me to do that. Not everyone gets to do that. I was in a scenario where I was going to go learn a bunch of new stuff. And it was also like Narnia in a way. Like I was in Athens for however long. And all of a sudden I was just in this totally different universe here. And people I did know, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That person's a professor, right? Or that person is, you know, that runs the photo lab or works at the library. And I knew all of that, but all of a sudden I was in that world too.
Yeah.
But also I'd be sitting there and as I come up with things like, oh, I need to, oh yeah, the History Center is perfect for that. Or, oh yeah, I can reach out to this person to get into this place in Shawnee, Ohio to take pictures. Like, you know, my resources, my light bulbs started going off more. And yeah, I didn't approach it like, oh, I got to come up with an idea that I'll still be doing and talking on a podcast about, you know, 3 years after graduation or whatever. But I did sort of view it like very seriously. I was like, you know, what I do for my thesis, I'm going to go all in. I don't know if I'm going to have another chance in my life to spend a year. I mean, I was doing a lot of other stuff. I was teaching and, you know, all sorts of, I mean, taking classes for the first couple years too. Mm-hmm. But it was like, I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to devote that much time to a creative project that doesn't need to be funded or make money. You know, so even though I was stopping, I wasn't making money. I was in this place where like, I could scrape together a little bit of funds to get the project going, but it didn't need to make money that year that I was working on my thesis. It needed to exist and be a real thing and, you know, get brought into the world. And so I approached that very, very seriously, but I'd be lying too, again, if I said that I thought I'd still be doing it.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel about this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where the best stuff comes from. You know, I think if when I was 24, you told me that the Aquabear Legion would still exist in 2025, I would think that was crazy. I would think it was awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the, you know, the nature of it is like, Invisible Ground is a business now. It is a real project that has budgets and deadlines. And, you know, I joke like I'm the best and worst boss I've ever had, you know? And so I feel a sense of urgency and commitment to the project even more so than I do to me, right? Like I can figure, it used to be like I kept thinking like, oh, I don't know what I'll do once in school because it seemed so weird. Like I'm going to quit my job and go to school like you said, and what's going to come of that? Because I think you always think you have imposter syndrome. I do all the time. But I'll tell you, like nothing solved my imposter syndrome at my old job quicker than leaving it and going into academia in my late 30s, right? Like all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, like I don't know how to do any of this. And people thought I did and we're fine with that. And then all of a sudden you realize like their confidence in you rubs off a little bit and you get there. But I still every day have it. But I mean, I think like once you're doing your own thing, it kind of just changes where you're trying to figure out, you know, what's the best way to do this? How does this make the most sense? And how can I bring in as much of these different pieces and bits of my world and experience into this one thing, which is where the record comes from, you know, which is where those kinds of things come from, the public tours of the cemetery and putting out a vinyl record and, you know, working with local printmakers to make like little prints for the project or whatever it is. Like, you know, you want to figure out how to borrow from all of those different things that have informed it, I guess. That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, wow. That is, it's a gosh, like a limitless thing. That's exciting. So when you say you have like budgets and deadlines, like how have you managed, like, as you said, this isn't your first entrepreneurial endeavor, but just how do you manage like setting it, what is a reasonable deadline and what is not? And when do you know when to push and when not to push and like sit on this thing, this decision, right? Like how do you manage like as this ramps up?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what's that been like for you?
Well, you know, I think it's so funny. I used to think people were joking always when they said stuff stuff like this, but I think part of it is luck, right? Like informed luck. I mean, I joked earlier that I couldn't have done this in my mid-20s, but that's not a joke. Like, my ego is pretty well gone now. It's not gone, you know what I mean? But I think anybody that does anything, anybody that's an artist that makes stuff has some sort of ego. Like, even if you're in, I mean, my band is a loud, you know, band that has been playing for many years, much more closer to a bowling night than an idea of getting rich doing it. And we play shows a few times a year.
For the love of the game,
joke,
man.
Yeah, but I joke, you know, that even though we don't care about that, we love playing music, we love playing with each other, and we joke like, oh, 8 people are going to be there. We're still standing on stage and playing our songs, and you paid $5 or whatever it is. Like, that means that we think it's important enough to do, even if nobody's listening, right? And so I do think that it's foolish to think that there's no ego or sort of drive, personal drive in that stuff. But a lot of it has subsided. And so when those decisions get made, I try to just sort of, you know, feel it out. Sometimes, you know, I'll tell you, funding, you know, it's not the answer because I often don't think of myself as very much of a capitalist, but the real answer is funding. You know, sometimes when a grant's going to work out for a certain place, or you have a certain organization or group involved and interested in doing stuff like this, that's sort of where those immediate ones lie. And then there's also passion projects and ones that you want to do, and you're trying to figure out how to get funding for that too. And it's sort of just like a little bit of both. You know, you keep a couple things on the back burner that you sort of keep open. You work with a few of the things that seemed a bit easier. And then I'll tell you, I mean, it's just like you, I'm sure, are aware. You know, we got connected just because I realized I forget you interviewed Ahmed or something. There was a million people I knew, and I've been following it. But the longer you do stuff, all of a sudden people, and especially for me, because I've been here for so freaking long, it's just like eventually people will start reaching out to you about other things, you know? And so I think that that's a good sign always to see how those projects develop and where they take you. But again, you hit on something there that can be really stressful because I think a lot of people that run their own businesses or entrepreneurs or artists and creators, you have this same thing where like you never quite know what's the right path to go. Like hard enough to get the idea to the finish line the first time and then to keep doing it. And then it's like, well, wait, should I have done this? Should I have followed up on this? Should I have pushed this one a little bit more? Should I have let this other thing that was like coming easy towards me in so easily, you know? But what I've learned is like, it is really exactly what people say. The conversations, I've had conversations that were great that I didn't think, man, that's going to turn into something. And those have turned into things. And then I've had other ones where I'm like, oh, this is totally going to happen. And I'm still waiting for those to happen. And then obviously, you know, it's in July of 2025, the other elephant in the room is the changes in funding and grant funding and this project also has been funded by organizations for years, giant organizations, not huge amounts of money, but organizations that are completely defunded right now. Yeah. National Endowment for Humanities, Ohio Humanities.
So I mean, what does that mean for your immediate future?
It means having probably a bit more of those stomach pains, right? I mean, you know,
unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it involves just kind of thinking about things differently and approaching projects a little bit differently and kind of, you know, I've been lucky that, you know, I have a private foundation that supports my work, has supported for a couple of years that it gives annually to the project. I'm hoping that continues. That's not something that's tied into, but I mean, when Invisible Ground got our first National Endowment for Humanities grant to do a couple markers and podcasts, like that was a huge thing. And that's the kind of thing, like that's a big deal.
That was via the Southeast Ohio
Museum? Yeah. Totally. It was with Southeast Ohio History Center applying for it. And it was a $25,000 grant. So in terms of the National Endowment for Humanities or any federal grant, that's pretty small. But it was a huge thing because not only was it, whoa, what we're doing, someone read this in Washington, this grant application, and decided this was worthwhile, and the places that are also getting them are big deal places. It also is in theory supposed to sort of start to set you on a path to keep working with them. Yeah. Not normally that they don't exist a few months after.
Yeah, that does make things a little different.
Yeah, so you just kind of figure out different ways.
So you know, 25, like whatever, the number doesn't matter, and a number of dollars get allotted. Is it like based on the grant, like how you spend that money? Like what's the oversight? Like somebody gives you $25,000, like what happens with that?
Yeah. So, oh man, not that many people do it. So I wish that I could give it. I'd love to provide more oversight on that if anyone wants to. Yeah. You know, with grants are all different too. And funders and projects are all different. So like with that National Endowment for Humanities grant, that was $25,000 towards, not complete even, but towards making immersive augmented reality sites at Stewart's Opera House inside and outside, and Renville and in Shawnee, which are both in Perry County, and then creating 2 podcast episodes. So that was for a project, you know, it was for these couple that were connected and kind of had some overlap.
So there is like very specific, here's what we are going to do.
Yeah, not only that, but I mean like those places, and not everyone's like that, you know, but those places want to know what you're spending that money on the best you can in advance, and then what you actually did spend it on in the end, you know. And so, yeah, you know, you pay yourself out of those funds, you pay your expenses, you pay for your work, you know, you pay for other people's work. And obviously making an app and an augmented reality thing and producing a podcast. And as it's grown, it's awesome. But I have a studio now and I've got business insurance and utility bills and, you know, stuff that's not even the cool stuff, man. It's not even the equipment, right?
Yeah.
And you realize that's part of the deal at a point. You know, it's funny, I came to your studio. Mine's over at Morrison School on Richland Avenue, and I've been there for a couple of years.
Wait, Morrison School?
The old Morrison School on Richland, the old one.
So
down past.
Oh fuck, where like H&R Block is at?
Yeah, totally. I'm right around the corner from H&R Block. I'm in the back there, and
I didn't realize that was the old Morrison Gordon.
Yeah,
well,
so
it was just Morrison then. Yeah. Now Morrison Gordon, but
totally.
No,
and,
that's cool.
So like I'm over there, and I've been there for a couple of years. But then, yeah, you know, I got overhead now, which is normal. That's the other thing. It took me a minute as a person that did that a lot for a living, working at Stewart's and other places. I was never directly involved. I worked on grants, but I never wrote them. You know, I provided budgets and materials and made sure logos were on things and stuff. I did the marketing end of it, you know, and so now you sort of see the other way around.
As a decision maker, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, like now it's like you're sort of like, okay, what am I going to go after with the money? Can I actually finish that project? Is this actually going to cost what I think it might cost, or am I totally screwing myself?
And like, let's see that. It's like, how do you get experience in that other than doing it?
No, and I tell you, like I'm good. Like, it's funny now. Yeah, I mean, because I could sit here, you know, and then the other way to spin it is like, okay, I feel pretty good about it now. It's been a few years of that, but man, you kind of can't settle into that too much, you know. And so, yeah, it's a matter of figuring out like what's going to work. What does somebody want to fund? What are people excited about? And then how can I marry that sort of with what I'm working on? And then now it's like, you know, after you're doing a little while, the advantage comes where it's like, I know what the overhead is now. But then, you know, again, it's like we want to keep expanding the project. And then it's like, ooh, you know, even though it's been successful for a few years, it's like I could screw up now and it's all for naught, you know? And you're trying to figure out like, oh, what happens when I bring, like I have had a few people helping me, but those are very part-time contract people that are doing specific gigs, right? So that whole thing changes when someone's working for you and with you.
Do you have any like actual employees, or just like the contracted?
Just contracted employees, but I mean,
Canada lady.
Yeah, I'm an AR developer in Canada, and then a couple of augmented reality. I've had an assistant producer on these last couple sites, but that's been someone working usually maybe a couple hours a week. You know what I mean? Just sort of involved with the whole project over 6 months. Another human being that I can be like, and like try to be like, what do you think about this? You know?
So then how long is it, just like project to project, or like what's like, is there a casual, like it's about this long for things? Or, I mean, it sounds like everything is very like nuanced.
Yeah.
But like, yeah.
I'm going to start using that word. I like that.
Like start to finish. Like, is it like I mean, 6 months, that would just seem like I would drive myself crazy trying to.
No, they end up a bit longer than that, you know. I mean, it's just like any production thing, right? I mean,
I don't know about production things.
Well, you do. I mean, even though you're not editing, you said you're running mostly off conversation. I mean, I see cables and microphones and a recorder.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for the credit.
There's production happening, you know, post or pre, it's all still, or during, it's all still production.
Cool.
But yeah, mine has too much sometimes in too many different areas. You know, I mean, the audio thing is one thing, and the invisible ground, the augmented reality is another thing. The physical marker getting made and put in the ground.
Who makes those?
I do. I get them designed. They're made. I design them.
Cool. Then, graphic design background.
Yeah. Thankfully. And then a place, I work with a place in Long Island, actually, in New York, that makes them for state parks and federal, you know, for national parks. So they're all like, you know, made for being outside and all that stuff. And they do a really nice job. But yeah, I mean, even that, dude, each one of those things, right? Everything could go wrong at any point. And they do, especially when you're starting to deal with things like making stuff appear on people's phones. I mean, like, I'm working on Amesville right now. That's where we're doing a few markers right now. And so think about this. I mean, without even getting into it, we're trying to make augmented reality happen on a phone app in a place that you can't make a phone call or text that, right?
Yeah.
And so the process is different there. You know, I'm using GPS at some of these other sites, but we can't do that here, you know, because there's no way to ping it. And so everything is a little different at each one. And so, you know, there's things that overlap that are the same, but yeah, it's the nuance is a great way to describe it. And so that changes the timeline, you know. And then the other thing which actually helps with some of this stuff is because it's an app, like when we talk about the app, you know, because I mean, the podcast is one thing, you know, that is a documentary podcast. It's a bunch of interviews. They're getting edited. They're getting researched. They're getting put together. I got to write a script for my part, and then I got to edit it all back together. And then there's music, right? There's sponsors and all of that not super fun stuff that you have to sort of balance and keep in mind. But it is usually the immersive sites and the augmented reality and the markers that are like the crazier lift, right? And with that, the one advantage is it's an app, so I don't want to update it all the time. And so, you know, usually what we've kind of done the last couple years is 1 to 2 updates a year, and that ends up being certain number of markers, whatever I'm working on at the time, you know. So like that National Endowment for Humanities one, in January, the Stewart's markers, the Renville one, and the Shawnee one went in on the app in an update. The new podcast came out over the course of, you know, however long, and then now it'll be this new one probably at the end of August or so. Will be 3 sites in Amesville, and then the Armory here in Athens, and then the History Center as well. So there'll be 5 on that one. And then, yeah, there'll be another one in late spring or something next year. So there's like this rough thing. And it's funny, I say late spring, and there's no way that is when the next one will happen. It'll be May or June, you know. But yeah, you sort of have a couple things going at once. And, you know, grants can also be good to force that schedule too. You know what I mean? Like the one I've been working on with Amesville, the contract stuff finished up June 30th, right? And so the project isn't done then, obviously, but you turned in your invoices and you're making sure, like, out of what's left that you're paying the things that you have left to do. But, you know, that thing's at, it doesn't feel like it, but it's at 85% or something completion. You know, it's close. It's going to be done here in the next month. And just ordered the signs this morning. So those got approved. So those will show up and get put in the ground. We're finishing up the app, and then the podcast will come, you know. But yeah, man, that is a sliding and changing schedule. Especially, I mean, I try to stay on top of things, but there's not someone else that it falls to often. Yeah, well,
right? Define that, like, on top of things. Like, you're the one kind of defining that too, which is like where I'm just like, God damn.
It's a mess, yeah. Well, I think it's personality type, right? I mean, like, I came from working not only crazy hours sometimes, but, you know, at a sort of different environment. Both working in nonprofits, I think, is one thing in general. I mean, you know, underfunded, understaffed, overextended, and trying to do a lot and also be
it's
cool.
Like sweat equity.
Yeah, totally. It literally is, right? And that's how it works. I'm not complaining about that. That's how I met all the awesome people I know, and how they take confidence in the fact that I can do something else, right? And just even beyond that, the work part, so many friendships and relationships. And so you get a lot out of that. But it helps a ton when you're doing something like this, because that's sort of what I was instilled in, you know. But yeah, staying on top. I mean, you sort of have to. It's like I got to sort of be my own guy. There's other things coming down the pipeline, you know, and you don't want to miss those. I mean, going back to that original what we were sort of talking about a little bit ago, you sort of are trying to. I had a friend one time that told me, it might have been when I started grad school even, basically something along the lines of like, whatever path you're sort of on is the right path. And the longer you spend the time trying to figure out if it was, or if you made a wrong turn at some point, like, you're not dealing with the
you're
stuff.
You're already on it, motherfucker.
So like, it's that one, right? Yeah. Like, and so, you know, that's all well and good. I've had plenty of things that still have made me question all of that statement too. But I think you sort of have to have that sort of faith that, okay, cool. Even if right now in this moment, I don't feel like I know what the hell I'm doing, at some point when I wrote that grant, or I told this person I would do this then, or I did these interviews, I had some sort of plan. And I make a lot of lists. I make a lot of spreadsheets, and a lot of ones that I save as untitled spreadsheet and don't ever use. You know, I mean, that's how I am. My brain, and then it's also part of the problem, which I'm sure you can identify with too. My brain is always, I am, unfortunately, especially after I got an MFA, like not only a producer of things, but I'm an artist. My brain does not, it's beneficial to the business thing because I can come up with stuff to do that people think also is cool, hopefully.
So also too, sometimes you have to like bet on that, right? Like I don't know why this is cool, but this is definitely cool, and it's going to take me seeing through that it is cool for it to be cool.
Yes.
Right?
I've taught, like I was saying, teaching undergrads. I have to teach some graduate classes too, and even when I was in my MFA, I was teaching every semester, and I've noticed this. I mean, it's true for any 18-year-old probably, but I've noticed it with production students, media production students who are 18 or 19. They're coming and they've made stuff and they're interested in things, but they don't have that other part yet, which they don't need yet, which is the part of like talking about it. Like, and I used to think it was really funny, especially when I was working on my thesis, because that was like all I freaked out about and had to do all the time was like, can you talk about what you want to do and why you want to do it to someone who matters? Because at some point, I mean, first of all, everybody matters as you're talking to about your work. Any interested person is a person you should be talking to about your work, you know? But you never know. Like, someone might want you to do that. And they're not, you're a spot. They can't remember a conversation with you. You're like, oh, I think what would be really cool, but I don't know if I can do it, is if I made a building appear. And I don't know, though, that's a lot. Like, I don't know if I can make an app and I'm kind of stupid or whatever. Like, no one is going to, myself included, and I have a pretty low bar, but like no one's going to hire that person, You don't
even believe yourself, man.
Totally. And so I think like one thing that happens, and that's what happens as you go through school, whether, especially in a creative pursuit, a media production or art school, is you have to learn to figure out like, and what the problem is I'm not a huge fan of that sort of side hustle or hustle culture. Like, I want to hustle less. I love invisible ground, but like if I could shave 10 hours off I've been trying to shave 10 hours off my work week forever,
Yeah, case closed, period.
Yeah,
Amen.
right? I mean, like, but the fact of the matter is like, I do it now because it's like, it is me. It is my life. I can't help myself. Yeah. And so part of it is then you have to get past really quick being able to talk about it. And so, I mean, this is obviously like a hugely comfortable environment to talk about it. I'm not sending a letter to the federal government asking for money or, going up to the state house for something or the scariest thing, which is still really scary now, is the new meetings. Someone that'll be like, I've heard about your project. Let's have a phone call. And it's someone I don't know. Right. And then you're like, oh, this is when it all falls apart. Like, this is when they find out I'm a fraud. Right. But that's not true. And I think you sort of got to lean on that stuff. Again, whatever path you're on is the right one. And so for me, it beats the alternative. I mean, I'm fully in it now. And so, I'll figure out if it's not this, it'll be something else. And that's okay. I don't stress about that as much as I used to, going back to that thing about like, oh, I quit my job during COVID. Like, you're thinking, what did I do? Why did I do that? The first risk. I don't feel as scared about that now. I took about 5 or 6 years of wearing down on that. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm employable. If it's not by me, it'll maybe be by someone else. Though I don't know. Now I've been working for myself. It might be tough, but yeah, I mean, you sort of learn the ability to not sell yourself, but like tell other people why you think this thing is important. And then what happens as the project goes on is people know about you and your work and what you do, and you don't know them always. So then this other stress gets kind of put in where you're like, oh, how do I make sure that when I do talk to them about it, they know that I'm in on this and that I can do this and that, and so what happens is you start to realize that like the more you just follow through on stuff and get things going and all the things you learn that make you crazy a little bit, all benefit towards that, right? I always go back to like, I think about when Nelsonville first started to get big, the festival first started to get big, was we had moved to a weekend. The fourth one was a weekend with Avett Brothers and a few other people. And Avett Brothers were huge then, but it was before they were gigantic. I mean, they were big. They couldn't play Stewart's anymore.
Wow.
It was too small.
It's like some shit my parents did too.
Yeah. And we had a big festival that was the first weekend long one with them at Hocking, and then the next year Willie Nelson played, and it was sort of like, oh, like it sort of changes the game a little bit.
Yeah.
And I always think like if you would have told me when I first started working there or at any point before I worked there that I'd be doing something like that, or even a few months before it happened, that we would have done that and then it would have kept going and growing and been this thing that became this thing. I don't know. I would have believed you, but I also been like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know if we have enough toilet paper for the weekend. I don't know if we have enough volunteers. I don't know if there's enough folding chairs. You know, the scope of planning and changing anything, any project, you know, it changes so much once it starts to grow. And so even Invisible Ground, you know, there's this sort of, I don't want to say I'm protective of it. I try to not be that protective of it, but there's always part of me too that's like bringing it in a little bit closer, you know, and figuring out like, okay, now I have to be, I've always had to worry and be calculated about what the next step is. But I think, you know, you don't want to screw it up. It becomes its own thing at a point. It's not this crazy idea anymore. It's like a thing that exists and other people enjoy it and use it. How can you do right by that becomes its own, you know, point of stress.
Yeah. I think you touched on it a few times, but like what like all these crazy challenges, stress, like logistics, what is exciting about this? Like why are you able to get up every day and keep fighting at this?
Yeah, all of it's exciting. It really is, man. I mean, like I think once you kind of have that, it's so funny. I don't get me wrong. I've thought about the stress and logistics and I do day to day, but it's so funny. I feel like I talked more about them in this last little bit than I normally do, because you're sort of looking at the project as a whole. Day to day, I don't know. I can't even explain it. I loved working at Stewart, so it's a weird thing to compare it to that, but that was my job before, and I was excited to get up every day and do that too. I think after 12 years of doing anything, it can wear on you a little bit, the parts that are harder, right? But I loved that, and I was lucky to do that. And I sort of felt like I stopped doing that and pivoted to this other thing before I really let that take it out of me. You know, like I sort of left feeling good about all of that still. It got close, maybe, right? Everyone has their moments of being like, oh, I need to do something different. But doing my own project, you know, I'd say mostly I try to, you know, every once in a while that stress and those logistics creep in, either because I'm thinking about them or I get an email about them. The post can't go in the ground here because there's a tree trunk underneath it or whatever it is, you know, all the way to this isn't working at all. Or there's no money or whatever it might be that could scare the crap out of you at any point. But usually the day-to-day stuff, I'm waking up just thinking like, what are we going to do? What are we going to make, man? What's going to happen?
That's funny. Like as an artist or creator, what are we going to create today?
You can hope for, you know what I mean? And then I think the second part of that is that's all you can hope for. And then the second thing, which I've been trying to do as much as I can, which is being aware of how important and valuable that is, you know. You sort of have the ability to chart your own course a little bit. And you know, if something catches, I mean, I have deadlines and I have things I got to get done, but like some of those are flexible, right? Some of those aren't, just like anyone else, you know? And those are the things that suck that you might not want to deal with, but you still deal with them.
But everything takes work, right?
Totally.
That's the work part.
That's the work part. Yeah. And of course, like it's obviously, you know, I mean, you know, I used to always joke, even when I was at Stewart's and the festival, like, man, maybe I just want to like mow the lawn. Like, I would just pass the OU groundskeeper and he'd be mowing, and he just that guy looks.
Once a week, bro. I'm driving past that guy like, this motherfucker's got it.
This guy's got it. I'm an idiot, right? Like, this dude's got it. And I bet you that guy is stressed out by that too, you know? But the fact of the matter is it has this sense of completion, right? And I think it's about approach and completion. It's about enjoying. Like, it sounds so cheesy. I sound like a live, laugh, love sign or something here. But it's about the journey, right? It's like about the work. It's not always about the project. It's about your practice. I think as an artist, as you know, what it turns into is, can you turn what you're doing into the thing you want to keep doing? And does it feel worthwhile? Do you feel like you're connecting to your community? Do you feel like you're connecting to yourself? Are you doing something that matters, even if it only matters for your own creative pursuits, let alone maybe more than that? And so I think that's the kind of approach I try to have day to day is, you know, I try to stay in that pocket of being appreciative of the fact that, you know, it manages to keep working. And also too, like, it's okay to give a little pat on the back for that. Like, cool, I'm paying the bills and I'm moving ahead and I don't have to go work for someone yet. I mean, I'm working for like all sorts of people, but not directly, you know? And I think that there's something magical in that. It frees up your brain in a different way. You know?
That's beautiful. So the community, man, how can they support you? They can listen to the podcast. They can download the app.
Yeah.
Go check out these historical sites.
Those are all huge ways to do it, and they're the most important ways. Largely, yeah. I mean, they're all free ways to go do it, but that's the meat of it, right? I want people to keep listening to the show, to subscribe, all the stuff, the follow, subscribe, rate, and review, right? Like that stuff is all real. I teach podcasting too. And for you too, they should go do it for this show too.
Shout out, yeah.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like if you don't have that stuff, it doesn't matter. And so that's huge. And going to the sites and seeing the stuff is huge. And then I think beyond that, like even separate from me, like just kind of engaging with those parts of their community, these histories and these stories. And we have one thing that we didn't talk about too much on here and all is some of these crazy connections, and just to sum them up, we have American Revolution, Underground Railroad, Indigenous Earthworks, early Ohio in the United States. There's all this stuff is within not even 5 minutes. All this stuff is in the city limits of the town we're in right now, let alone everywhere else.
This Ahmed touched on that.
Yeah.
How people like just walk by all this historical shit 20 every day, 24/7. You just never think twice about.
And besides wanting people to know about that stuff and give it its due and make people realize to be proud of not just Appalachian, Ohio or Athens County, but all of these small places like local history and places that have huge connections to these bigger things. One, we should know about that because there's a sense of pride. Two, we're talking about groups of our society that should be given that credit, that this is a place that was built by all sorts of people, and not just, the people that came here after the Northwest Territory, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. But then the other thing is I think, it's about changing the way you look at the space around you. Like what Ahmed said, the idea of like walking by the stuff and not realizing it's not just the stuff, that there's huge pieces. And I mean, maybe it is the 24 years or whatever living in Athens. It's going to make me sound like a little bit of a hippie here. But it's like, I think people are like, you're nicer and better to each other. You know more about the world around you and the other people that are in it. It changes the way you walk and approach it and walk through it. And so, I'm not saying Invisible Ground's going to do that by any means, but I'll throw my hat in the ring to try, and if that's the way in for someone, then great, And so I think, that's part of that too. I think being able to, with the community to engage in that conversation, that's something people can do too, is by checking this stuff out, thinking about things differently and telling their friends about it. Not because I want more podcast subscribers, which I do,
but share the message that you're portraying.
Yeah, like I'm doing this for a reason. Yeah. It's not all numbers and marketing, Yeah. And then I think, the other way that people can help is, of course, financially, people supporting. And so there's a few different ways to do that. Folks can write a check through the Southeast Ohio History Center and put Invisible Ground in the memo, and it'll go to me. They're my fiscal agent, so it can be a charitable donation through them. I also have a Patreon page. Some people just prefer to throw a few bucks a month at that. That is huge. In a big project, to have unearmarked funds is also huge, and the Patreon's very good for that. Like, oh crap, this thing I didn't think was going to show up as a bill is here, and I have this little bit of money from my Patreon subscribers.
Nice.
And so, at patreon.com/Invisible Ground, I think you can find us on there, and as low as $1 a month, give a little bit of money. And then, beyond that, I'm always interested, which usually happens when I do things like this too, to hear from people that have some sort of interest in it, right? Even if they just want to talk about it or give some sort of feedback or involvement, but also two, all the way up to people that, work at a grant foundation, that work in a city or a village or a historical site that's like, whoa, that would be a really cool way to get people interested in what I'm trying to do. I want to have conversations with those people too, because, I love talking to people about it too, but that's how the project 2 years from now that keeps paying the bills gets funded, is starting to think about what it might be too. So, yeah. And then, so listening to the podcast, that's on everywhere, streaming, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. And then you can go to findinvisibleground.com. Everything's kind of on there. You could download the app on the App Store for Apple or Android.
Yeah. Huge. Yeah. Brian, this was amazing. Invisible. You know, it's really funny. The S onto things, like I do that all the time. Like Kroger's,
Midwestern thing.
Yeah,
that's why I corrected you. It's not even like a correction. Like you're wrong. It's like, oh, I totally get it.
Yeah, that's so funny.
It is. You were not the first person to call us Invisible Grounds. And you know what? If someone wants to call me that, it's great, man. But if they go to findinvisiblegrounds.com, it won't get there. But I probably will. The Google will get them there eventually, right? Yeah. Kroger's. Yeah. I love it.
Perfect. Brian Costco, Invisible Ground. I appreciate your time. Like, open invite. If you have like an exciting thing coming out, you want to come back, or like you mentioned like there's some people that you've talked to that you thought would be cool on the pod. Like, I again appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. Keep doing this.
Thank you. Awesome, Brian.